welcome everybody. So today we have Ms. Carol Wilson, who I often call the heartbeat of Redemption City, here to be interviewed. And of course, a man who needs no introduction, Pastor Jeffrey Noblet, is here as well.
And I call Miss Carol my grandmother.
Yes.
Yes, my grandson.
Amen. So the idea of the podcast, the reason we kind of first wanted to do this is we take, we get time with church members and people. And all the time when I'm at a lunch or a coffee or talking to somebody like you, I'm thinking, man, I wish everybody in our church would have just heard the wisdom or that story. And, so that's really the idea, just to, so the audience is our church. And, so that we can just kind of get to know each other better and hear each other's stories. It's because we can't all get coffee together all the time. So now we can just sit and listen to you. So tell us where you grew up and kind of how you grew up.
Oh, my goodness. Do you have a long time?
We got all day. The internet is unlimited with what we can put on there, so we can take all day.
Yep.
Well, I'm very blessed to have grown up in Charleston, West Virginia. I grew up in a suburb of Charleston. And I had wonderful parents. And my mother was the oldest of 11. My dad was one of 8. So I had hundreds of first cousins and lots of aunts and uncles. And it was a middle-class family where I grew up. The town I grew up in, everyone's father worked at the same place. And I went to school with everyone from 1 through 12 and just had a great time growing up in the little town that I grew up in. My dad was sort of the caretaker of his family farm, and which was about 2 hours away. So even though I grew up in the city, I also had the opportunity to grow up in the country life, in the farming life. So once a month, no matter whether we wanted to or not, we had to go up and check on the farm because he leased it out to people that needed to have land for cattle. Wow. So I had the opportunity to, and of course, I only had one sister. She was 11 years older than me. So my dad, of course, wanted a boy, but I disappointed him there. But he taught me to hunt and fish. And
that's awesome.
So I grew up with all my cousins, whether in the city or on the farm, and hunting and fishing and swimming in the rivers with the snakes. And
Miss Carol. Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I can't explain what a wonderful childhood it was in the hills and the mountains of West Virginia. So that was part of my growing up.
You're like a true cowgirl.
Sort of, kind of. I was a very feminine tomboy.
Yeah.
So I rode horses bareback. I swam, fished, hunt, did everything you can imagine. Growing up, it didn't matter. I played softball, I guess, from the age I was 10 to almost 60. I just was into sports and liked to play tennis and things like that. So I had a great childhood.
Tell us about your parents. What were their names and what were they like?
My dad was George Haley Ballingy, and they are from French, the country of France.
Oh.
And, yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, so my mom, she was more Irish, and I think her mother had some Indian in her. And let's see, my mother's name was Daisy Fern.
Daisy.
That's a good name.
Yes, well, it's a funny story about that, which everybody that knows me real well in the church knows this story. But mother being the one of 11, I always told her that my grandmother was too busy to have her in a hospital or in the home, and she was out in the field working and had mom and named her Daisy Fern. So
well, there you go.
There it is.
So, yeah.
More of a description at that point.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Christian household?
Mother was a Christian. Dad never accepted Christ till he was almost, I guess, 68, 69. But I remember I grew up in a little church. It was called Farrar Memorial Baptist Church. It was a missionary, hard-shell Baptist, hellfire and brimstone.
Yeah.
went to church, was in the youth group. We didn't have GA or RA. We did, West Virginia didn't have that kind of stuff. They weren't really anything to do with the Southern Baptists.
Okay.
And so grew up in the church. I sang in the church, sang in the choir, sang solos, sang in groups. If you were in our family, you had to play a musical instrument. So I took piano lessons.
Yes.
I hated piano lessons,
Yeah,
but
we
I
kinda
took
did.
piano lessons.
Yeah.
But no talent really there now. Let's see, what else? I accepted Christ when I was 8 years old. And like I say, the whole time I was growing up till I was 18, went to church faithfully. When the doors were open, you had to be there whether you wanted to be or not. And just had great childhood friends. And of course, went to church with them, families. We went to school together. So it was just one big happy neighborhood family.
Mhm.
I lived on Church Street, so
There you go.
every church in that town, no matter what denomination, was on that street.
That's
And
awesome.
so, I had lots of friends of other faiths.
Okay.
And so it was
So-
just,
Tell us then about fast forward to when you met your husband, and so how did you meet your husband?
well, my first husband, because I've been divorced, we were high school sweethearts. So after we graduated, he went into the Air Force, and I was contemplating going to college at Duke. And then in his process, I guess, of joining the Air Force, he decided he wanted to get married. So I said yes. So we got married when we was 18.
Mhm.
And the first place we lived was France.
There you go.
Yeah, so we lived
Like your
in
folks there.
Yeah.
in Saint-Bassini, France.
Wow.
He was stationed at Chaumont Air Force Base, and we were there just 6 months. But I did get to meet President de Gaulle and shake his hand.
How about that?
Wow.
And I have pictures.
That's
I want to see
amazing.
those.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So then Kennedy and de Gaulle, of course, did not get along.
Okay.
So we were sent back to, he was sent back to Alamogordo, New Mexico, and I was pregnant, and I couldn't travel at that time because I was having some issues. So he went on to Alamogordo, New Mexico, and then when I got well enough, we went out there, and that's where I had my first child, Randy. And we lived there until he was sent to Vietnam. And when he went to Vietnam, I came back to West Virginia, and that's when I went to school. And I went to Charleston Area Medical Center, a division of West Virginia University, and started working in the OR and worked in the OR 20 years, and then went on into hospital management after that. That's another story. But
Yeah, I think a lot of people who haven't met, or they've only met you in the past few years, don't know that about you. That Miss Carroll's done some
Uh-huh.
stuff. She's
Oh,
built
yeah.
some hospitals and stuff. And so as soon as I found that out, she found her way onto the long range planning team very soon.
She knows what's going on.
Let's just go into your career for a second. So what 20 years in the OR and then in hospital management. What did you enjoy about any of those roles, and as your career progressed?
well, it's hard to okay. I love surgery, but surgery is mentally and physically exhausting.
Yes.
So I think before I get to that part of my career, I probably need to go back to
Let's do it.
the first marriage. And okay, so he was sent to Vietnam, so I went back to West Virginia and went to school. And then I forget how long he was there, but anyway, when he came back, then we were stationed in Columbus, Ohio. And then he got out of the Air Force, went back to West Virginia. He went to work at DuPont, where my dad and everybody we grew up with, dad worked at. And he didn't like that, so he ended up going to Kansas City to work for TWA. And then he wasn't there 2 or 3 weeks, and he heard that Braniff was hiring in Dallas. So that's how we ended up in Fort Worth.
Okay, I was at, yeah.
Yeah. So we were married 17 years, and I have to admit that being in healthcare, being in the OR, I was very ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
So he was ambitious, and I was ambitious. But we sort of grew apart, and him being in Vietnam didn't help. So that marriage dissolved in 1980. And I have to admit that when I left home at 18, and I'm very ashamed to admit this, I didn't go to church for 18 years. What a sad thing to admit. But I realized after our divorce that I was going down the wrong path. I was too ambitious. All I cared about was my career. And so, of course, that was, to me, was climbing the ladder, going from one position to the other position, and whatever position opened, I wanted to be that person. And so that's how I ended up in hospital management. And so then in 1983, I met my Ron. And Ron and I met through my very, very best friend. And Ron was the warrant officer for the city of Grapevine, and that's where I lived at that time. And we met. Well, she called and said that she had a real good friend who was recently divorced and had 2 kids, and wanted to know about the singles conference at First Baptist Church Grapevine. Okay. And I said, oh, gosh, why don't just have him call me and I'll tell him about it. So when he called, he was from Toledo, Ohio, and I grew up in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. So we talked for about 2 hours, but we didn't meet real soon after that. Then we met at the singles conference and basically just said hello, whatever. He was raised Lutheran, so we met. The first date we had was in the singles group had events all the time, and it was on Valentine's in 1983.
Tomorrow is Valentine's at the time of this recording.
How about that?
That's amazing.
I know.
42 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we met. Okay, we had our date, started dating, and we were married in May.
Wow.
There you go.
Right. So it was funny because
I'm sorry to interrupt. So at that point, you've basically been walking with the Lord again for 2 or 3 years.
Yes. I had rejoined. I had started going to church and rededicated my life and was very active in church and whatever.
Looking back on your first marriage, what is one thing you see that you learned from, not just because you weren't a part of church, but like your walk with Jesus versus your second marriage? Because you talk so highly about your Ron, as you call him.
Well, Bill, I think was a Methodist, and I don't know how strong his family and growing up was as far as church or et cetera. And so the difference was he did not want to go to church. So unfortunately, we did not raise our sons in the church. Mm-hmm. So that's another really bad thing, to not raise your children in church. But thank God they turned out okay. Mm-hmm. But
yeah.
Anyway, so Ron was raised Lutheran, but they were very strict church-going followers, and I don't know anything about that denomination, but he really believed in going to church and tithing and being involved in church and church work. So that could explain the difference.
He was more intentional, leading your family. Sounds
yes.
Like, yeah.
Plus, he was 9 years older than me, so that, I think, made a difference, too. So
you meet Ron, Valentine's Day of 1983, get married in May of that year, and then, take us from there.
Okay, so we lived in Grapevine, so married in 83. Of course, we have to blend our families. That was very difficult. Uh, unfortunately, my oldest son, who has now passed away, did not want Ron to be married or me to be married to another man other than I think Randy went to his grave hoping I would ever get back with
Right.
his first dad, but
Yeah.
that was just something that you deal with when you remarry. But I have great stepchildren, Amy and Andrew. Andrew lives in Godley, and Amy lives south of Houston in League City. And she has 2 children, and Andrew has a little boy, Jet, who's now 10.
Yeah.
He's
That
come around here a couple times, right?
Yes,
Your
he's
buddy.
been here.
Yeah.
He came to the
Kids Day.
school, the camp. This
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
kid- yeah,
right.
kid-
Right.
kids camp.
Yeah.
Right, and every
So
now and then
cool.
he comes to me with me to church and
Yeah.
Sunday school. And Rama's ex-wife was not giving us. She was giving us a hard time as far as having the children, and we had to deal with that, and I had to deal with some of the things going on with my kids, but I think we worked through it. We never gave up on making that happen. We never gave up not going to church. We never gave up in giving it to God. We never gave up praying about making that work. One time I told him, I said, Ron, I said, what we have to do is we have to set a good example. And that's basically all we can do. We can keep our faith. We can pray. We go to church. When the children are with us, we will go to church. We will take them to church and do the best we can. And I think we've done pretty good
Oh yeah,
with that. So,
for sure you have. So Jeffrey and I know a little bit about a couple things that happened next. So kind of tell the church about when he got sick.
well, before that, I need to let you know that him being 9 years older than me, he retired a lot earlier than I did. And of course, I was, too ambitious, got recruited from one healthcare system to another healthcare system to another healthcare system and grew that career. Let's be honest, I was going to church, I was faithful, but I was still ambitious. Wanted that lifestyle, wanted those fine homes, wanted them new cars every 3 years. And I can tell you today, people, you do not want to live that lifestyle. You do not want to put your job first.
Why?
Because it doesn't matter. And God finally convinced that of me one day, but that's another part of the story as we get into
Sure.
Ron getting ill and whatever. So going from healthcare system to healthcare system, the last place I worked was in Waco at Baylor Scott and White Waco, which used to be the old Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center there. And in 2004, my oldest son was diagnosed with cancer, a very rare cancer. And he had to have surgery. And so that started 14 long years of him battling, being sick and ill and going through that process. So also during that process, I was traveling between Waco and Fort Worth because he lived in in White Settlement and worked at Lockheed. And between him taking chemo and having all kinds of hospital stays, I lived on Interstate 35. So in 2010, I was diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia on the left side of my face. That it makes it almost impossible for me to, number one, sing because it irritates and I start burning and having all kinds of issues, and or talking for a long length of time. So then I also had brought my mother from West Virginia to live with me in Waco, and had her in my home till 2012. And then I had to put her in a nursing home, and then she passed away. And then in 2013, I decided I needed to retire and move to Fort Worth and take care of Randy. And so we bought a new home there in Llano Springs. So, and during all that time that I was working and Ron had retired, he went to be a great volunteer with the Texas Baptist Church Builders. And he did that for about 20 years. So, and when I could, I would go with him, especially on the weekends. I would run to wherever they were in Texas and be a part of that process. And I can't tell you what a great life that was, and how that was so beneficial to be a part of seeing little churches that had zero money,
Right.
and then all of a sudden they raise all this money to build what, or to purchase what needed to be to build that church or build that life center or that gymnasium or whatever they were trying to do. And we would come in and do it in a couple of weeks.
That is such an amazing ministry.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then
That still is, I'm sure, reaping fruit today. I mean, you think about all that y'all did. Wow.
yeah, and of course made a wealth of great friends, and
Yeah.
of course, unfortunately, we've lost several lately. But anyway, from that point, so moved to Fort Worth in 2014. We were having a home built in Llano Springs, and we kept coming by South Hills Baptist Church, and finally to see if they were building our home, and they never did start building our home. And so we kept coming up here, and then we had sold our home like in one day in Waco, and we were living in our motor home, which we used to travel to the Texas Baptist Men. So finally we went to them and said, "Hey, do you have anything that's finished? We're in a motor home with 2 dogs. Find us something."
Yeah.
So they had a couple of houses, so we bought one of them and lived there. But one day I was, Randy was real ill. I would spend most of my day with him. I would come home at night. Ron was getting older, unable to do the yard work, things like that. And we had several friends that were in senior living centers. So one day I was out for a walk, and God said, "Carol, what are you doing? This home means nothing. Why do you keep wanting and spending your money like this? What are you trying to prove? This matters nothing. Your husband's getting older. He needs you. Randy needs you." And I went home and I told Ron, I said, "You want to live in a senior center? Sell this place and we'll go live in that senior center." We went from a 4-bedroom, 3 full bath, 3-car garage to a 1-room, 1-bath senior center apartment.
Yeah.
The reason we bought this house, I was hoping, my son being ill, that he would move in with us so I wouldn't have to go back and forth all the time.
Yeah.
But he loved his home. He had a sweet little home over in White Settlement. He was proud of his home, and he was a Cowboy fan. That house was covered.
My guy.
Let's say
Covered.
this guy wants that.
Yeah.
His shower curtain in the guest bedroom was
Oh, no.
Cowboy.
There you
go.
His trash cans were Cowboy. His walls were covered.
Toilet seat was Eagles, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show its proper respect. That's right. Man. Carol,
So-
what was and we can move on if you want, but was it all those things bringing pressure on your life that you think you were more open to hear that from God? Because it sounds like you were aware of, you've mentioned, going for the jobs, going for that, and you still were going to church. But I think a lot of us can identify where kind of in the back of our head, we kind of avoid dealing with certain things like the wants and the desires, we can justify them. Was it the season of life that you're in that you think you were just like done, or was it just kind of one of those miracle moments God just,
I think it was a miracle moment.
he just opened up your eyes?
When I was 3 years old, I knew I was very, very, very independent and strong.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a God thing because Carol wasn't going to give up.
So he had to kind of interrupt.
He had to get my attention. He
Yeah.
got my attention when I got the divorce, and I started going to church, and I remember sitting in that church service, and God saying, "You better go up there, and you better I'm serious. You better rededicate your life right now, or I've had it with you."
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. He told me that, and not in words, but I
Louder
knew it.
than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew. Wow.
So anyway, we moved to the senior center. Oh gosh, what happened after that? I told Brandy we moved into and Brandy said, "Well, I just want you to be happy," because he didn't want to move in with me. Plus, he loved cats. We had 2 dogs. You know how life
What are you going to
is.
do? Yeah. They're not going to blend.
Right. So, in 2017, Randy said, "No more. No more chemo.
Yeah.
No more of this. I've had it." So we kept going to the doctor, and finally, thank God, the PA came in one day and said, "Y'all have got to get on hospice." So
And he was how old at the time?
53.
53.
Yeah, so he died in December 8th, 2017. So
Tell us about, and I'm partial to this story, not just because I'm a Cowboys guy, but tell us about the story with
with the oncologist. Well, so Ron had been diagnosed prior to that, maybe a year before that, with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So one week I'd be at Texas Oncology with Randy, and one week I'd be at Texas Oncology with Ron. And one was getting chemo, or one was just seeing the doctor, or whatever. And we became really close to Dr. Barrera, plus they knew I had been in healthcare for 49 years, and they always teased me, "We could put you to work, or why don't you come and do this or that?" And I said, "Well, I could do it."
Yeah.
But anyway, so one day I was, I think it was Ron was getting chemo, and when I went into the room where they do the chemo to sit with him, and they said, "Dr. Barrera wants to see you." And I thought, "Oh no, what's going on with somebody?" So I said, "Well, I'm in here with Ron." And they said, "Well, he'll find you. He's with a patient right now." So I was sitting there, and about, I guess, 10 or 20 feet away, he stood across the room and motioned for me to come and talk to him. So, of course, I was worried. And so I went over there, and he said, "I have these Cowboy tickets that I can't attend this game. And I want you," and of course, Ron was a Cowboy fan too. And he said, "I want you and Ron and Randy to go to this game." He gave us tickets to the game. He gave us the parking pass, the what is it, the brochure that they give, the whole works.
Yeah.
And so that was the last. We went to the game. Randy was really not feeling well. I don't think we were able to stay the whole game. And I've got great pictures of Randy
What a memory.
at the stadium. And of course, he'd been there before, but Ron and I got to experience that with him. So, what a gift.
Yeah.
And what a doctor.
I was going to say.
Dr. Barrera,
saw
I
y'all.
would highly recommend him. He's just phenomenal. He's
Yeah.
very caring and loving.
Saw y'all. Yeah.
You know, I think so. You've experienced, you know, if anybody that a young person might meet you and even know you for a little while in our church and think, well, it's probably just been a long string of green lights through her whole life. It's just been
So easy,
she's just
right?
been
Yeah.
going to Sunday school and growing in the Lord for
Right.
the past few decades. And you know, and if you think about, for the most part, that's been true. But what would you say to younger women or young moms in the church, or just think about maybe even new Christians in the church that are having a tough time, that are not sure what the next step might be? How would you coach them or mentor them?
Well, my go-to is daily prayer, reading the Bible, going to church. You need your church family. And see, I knew that all those 18 years, I kept thinking, I don't have a church family. I don't have a church family. I grew up having a church family, and I don't have that. So you need each other. You need the corporate worship. You need to hear the pastor on Sunday. That gets you through the week. You need to get as involved as you can. And that's not easy, being young and raising young children and maybe having a full-time job.
Right.
It's very, very difficult. And it's even crazier today. I don't think I could handle it today, really, to be honest. But prayer. I mean, if it wasn't for prayer, I don't know what I'd do.
What else do we need to know, or what else would you like to share? I mean, wisdom, story, anything.
Wisdom, story. Well, I do know that in the type of career I had, I was very blessed. Early on, God gifted me with leadership and organizational skills that were very beneficial to my career in healthcare. And as I went from healthcare system to healthcare system and accepted more responsibility, and then become very involved in being on the teams that designed and equipped and decorated hospitals and clinics and outpatient clinics and surgery centers and cancer centers, the whole schmeal. There wasn't anything we didn't do. And I had to depend on God a lot. I mean, many, many prayers went up. The first thing I did in the morning is I would say, God, you got to help me today. You got to get me through this. Because I was always meeting with senior management or doctors that were very demanding. So I had to depend on God. I prayed a lot and prayed hard. And I have to give a lot of credit to Ron. And I always told my friends that Ron saved me. He really did. Because the almost 3 years that I was divorced, that Ron and I got married. When I met Ron, I feel like God put Ron in my life. And Ron was such a great support, and he was so different from my first husband. So he was so supportive. He was just there for me every step of the way. And I just can't explain the difference in the first marriage to the second marriage. And someone that goes through divorce, it is very difficult. And there wasn't a lot of divorced people in my family.
Right.
So that was sort of a stigma. And but went through a lot of losses. I lost my son in 2017. I lost my sister and brother-in-law to COVID. I lost my husband to COVID. So I lost my best friend. She didn't die of COVID, but she had non-alcoholic liver disease, and she was like a sister to me. And there's been a lot of loss in my family, but I can truly tell you that I couldn't have got through it if I didn't have God in my life, if I didn't have prayer life, I didn't have a church family. I can't express what it is to come to church on Sunday and see smiling faces and get the hugs that you get and know that they're praying for you. You know, before we merged, we called it Sunday school or small groups. You had that group of people, and you had other people in the church that you were involved with some way or somehow, you know, if you was on committees or whatever. So I just don't know what I'd do without my church family.
And you're still going strong. We have not mentioned CCA, so could you tell us what you do with CCA just a little bit?
Oh, yeah, I love to volunteer. CCA is a Christian Community Assistance on Bowie Street in Fort Worth, Texas, and we are a food and clothing pantry. So I am blessed. My husband, when I was taking care of Randy, my husband volunteered there, and he even ended up being on the board there and the vice president of the board. And when Randy died, he decided that I needed to do something, and they needed help with interviewing the clients when they come in, the new clients, or they have to be recertified every year. And so I went in and interviewed and started being an interviewer of new clients. So I get to meet the new clients that we have, and I get to try to help them if they need help with their rent or utilities. I get to help them if they need training to find new jobs. I get to help them, of course, be able to come once a month and get their food and clothing, and just give them a lot of resources that are in Fort Worth to help people. So it's a blessing. I feel so good when I leave there. I feel like God has me there for a reason. I get to pray with them. If they need prayer, doesn't matter if they're new or just being recertified. If they are having a bad day and they'll say, would you pray for me? And then I'll say, well, you want me to pray right now? So
awesome.
I'll pray right now. So
You're on the front lines.
yeah. So my other, hopefully new volunteer job will be at the pregnancy center. And I interview tomorrow.
Okay, good. Good to know.
Wow.
So
You're
we'll
going to
see.
do great.
I don't know what I'll be doing, but
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've got mine soon. I'm gonna try to do a couple of hours every Tuesday afternoon. So,
Awesome.
I love you, Miss Kara. I mean, I really do. I think one of the, you're such a gift from the merger. I just can't even imagine if God hadn't done that. And so, love you, mean it, and just so grateful to, be in partnership with you and be buds.
I love y'all too. Bye.